Jesus' family struggled to understand his behavior. Everywhere Jesus went, crowds swelled around him until there was no room. But at the same time, the Pharisees began to turn against him. In Mark 3, Jesus and his newly appointed disciples entered a home, and so many people followed that Jesus couldn't even eat. Mary and Jesus' brothers had to have had a hard time understanding why their brother was drawing such large crowds, but upsetting religious authority figures. If he was indeed the Messiah, wouldn't the Pharisees be the first to know? So they decided they needed to step in. Mark 3, 20-21, Amplified Bible. Then he came to a house in Capernaum, and a crowd formed again, so many people that Jesus and his disciples could not even eat a meal together. When his own family heard this, they went to take custody of him, for they were saying, "He is out of his mind." Even with all the signs of Jesus, his family thought he was out of his mind. Also, the teachers of the law said he was possessed. Mark 3, 22-26. The scribes who came down from Jerusalem were saying, "He is possessed by Beelzebul, Satan, and he is driving out the demons by the power of the ruler of the demons." So he called them to himself and spoke to them in parables. "How can Satan drive out Satan? If a kingdom is divided, split into factions and rebelling against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. And if a house is divided against itself, that house cannot stand. And if Satan has risen up against himself and is divided, he cannot stand, but is coming to an end." The people who knew Jesus best, and those who supposedly knew God the best, were amazed when Jesus began his ministry. Who did Jesus think he was? His family stood outside and sent someone to fetch him. Mark 3, 32-35, Amplified Bible. A crowd was sitting around him, and they said to him, "Look, your mother and your brothers are outside asking for you." And he replied, "Who are my mother and my brothers?" Looking at those who were sitting in a circle around him, he said, "Here are my mother and my brothers. For whoever does the will of God by believing in me and following me, he is my brother and sister and mother." Several lessons emerge from this for us. First, he did not dishonor his natural mother, for he said that spiritual relationships precede nature. It was more to Mary's credit to do the will of God than to be his mother. Secondly, it discredits the dogma that Mary was a perpetual virgin. Jesus had brothers. He was Mary's firstborn, but other sons and daughters were born to her afterward. Jesus put God's interests above natural ties. Luke 14, 25-27, Amplified Bible. Now large crowds were going along with Jesus, and he turned and said to them, "If anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, and even his own life, in the sense of indifference to or relative disregard for them in comparison with his attitude toward God, he cannot be my disciple. Whoever does not carry his own cross, expressing a willingness to endure whatever may come, and follow after me, believing in me, conforming to my example in living and, if need be, suffering, or perhaps dying because of faith in me, cannot be my disciple." The passage reminds us that stronger cords bind believers to fellow Christians than blood relations when those relatives are unsaved. Finally, it highlights the importance Jesus places on doing the will of God. Do I meet the standard? Am I his mother or brother? Number 5. his family members were among his 12 disciples. Indeed, at least 5 and probably 7 of the 12 were Jesus' relatives. However, his brothers remained skeptical until after the resurrection, when James and Jude became believers and penned 2 of the books of the New Testament. Number 6. Jesus gives John responsibility for Mary. Jesus saw John and his mother bewildered and grieving as he hung on the cross. In his darkest moment, Jesus made sure that Mary would be cared for. John 19:26-27, Amplified Bible. So Jesus, seeing his mother and the disciple whom he loved, esteemed, standing near, said to his mother, "Dear woman, look, here is your son." Then he said to the disciple, John, "Look, here is your mother. Protect and provide for her." From that hour, the disciple took her into his own home. Number 7. His family members also wrote part of the Bible. Although these 2 brothers wrote 2 books of the New Testament, they never took advantage of their relationship with Jesus. They never said, "Listen to me, I am a brother of Jesus." Jude says, "I am the brother of James." So his brothers were persuaded by the resurrection that Jesus, who had lived with them in the carpenter's cottage in Nazareth, was none other than the Son of God. James is mentioned as a member of the little prayer group that waited for the coming of the Spirit at Pentecost. So Jesus' cousins followed him, and his immediate family believed in him. That tells you something about the quality of Jesus' character. It couldn't have been easy to be in the family. However, even Christianity is not about what is easy. So Jesus found several apostles from his wider family circle. But his immediate family didn't know what to make of him. When you have lived with someone for 30 years, and they unexpectedly go around saying they are the Messiah, it can't be easy. At the beginning of his public ministry, he seems to disown Mary. Most assume that Joseph had died by this time. He didn't call her mother anymore. He called her woman. "Woman, what have I to do with you?" was his first recorded comment to Mary at the wedding of Cana.